Part 1: The Opening Hook. A crumbling American identity. One rule: avoid buying American. At first, it sounds like the kind of dramatic slogan a protester might carry through the streets. But this isn't a slogan, it's policy. Canada, America's closest ally and neighbor, responds to Washington's trade restrictions by mirroring them. Suddenly, the two nations, once bound by friendship and intertwined economies, stand locked in a bitter standoff. On shelves, the consequences appear quietly but unmistakably. Where Oreos once tempted children in Toronto supermarkets, there is now empty space. Clothing racks stripped of Levi's denim. Parents searching for baby lotion find the familiar American Eagle gone, replaced by a foreign label. For decades, America had exported more than products, it exported identity. Brands weren't just goods. They were symbols of modernity, convenience, even trust. Self. To buy American was to buy into a global idea of progress. From Paris to Mumbai, Los Angeles packaging carried an aura, a promise that life could feel a little more advanced, a little more secure, if only you chose the American label. Now, that aura is fading. One shipment delay, one regulatory shift, and even America's closest allies are turning away. If this unraveling continues, it won't just be about sneakers or cereal. It will be about something deeper, boiled, cultural relevance, the subtle but devastating erosion of soft power. Because history tells us something chilling. Nations do not always lose power through war. Sometimes they lose it through silence, through markets that quietly choose different partners, through consumers who no longer trust the old symbols. Rome once stamped its authority on coins that circulated from Gaul to Jerusalem. When those coins stopped being trusted, Roman power cracked long before the legions collapsed. America's logos, Oreos, Levi's, Johnson's Baby, are today's coins of empire. What happens when they no longer carry value? The question hangs heavy: how close is the edge, and which U.S. brands will not survive the fall? The story begins far from Washington or New York. In the everyday routines of families in cities like Mumbai, Paris, and Tokyo, at supermarket shelves, pharmacy counters, and fashion displays. Places where history rarely announces itself, but where the quiet unraveling of trust can change the balance of global culture. Our journey begins in India, a billion-person market where for generations, American products weren't just. Part 2: India, the first great defection. Morning in Mumbai. The streets hum with auto rickshaws. Children in crisp uniforms hurry towards schools, and families spill into supermarkets for the week's shopping. In one aisle, mothers reach for rice and lentils, the quiet foundation of Indian kitchens. On the next shelf, gleaming packages of breakfast cereals and snack foods once dominated by American labels now look different. From a distance, they seem familiar. Red logos, cheerful fonts. But look closely, and the eagle has vanished, replaced by the maple leaf. It is here in the unassuming aisles of Indian supermarkets that the shift in global consumer power reveals itself most clearly. For generations, American brands were not just food or toiletries. They were aspiration. A tin of Quaker oats on the counter was more than porridge, it was a marker of modern life, a symbol that a family was aligned with the urban, global middle class. Johnson's Baby lotion promised cleanliness and safety, the reassurance of science in a fast-changing society. Kellogg's cornflakes, displayed proudly in middle-class kitchens, became shorthand for progress, modernity, even status. But in late 2024, cracks appear. White at first, then widening into fractures. Shipments from the U.S. began arriving late, or not at all. Customs delays erupted without warning, leaving containers stalled at ports in Gujarat and Chennai. Anti-dumping duties small, sharp tariffs spiked overnight. Prices fluctuated wildly, leaving shopkeepers in Delhi and Bengaluru stranded between angry customers and empty shelves. What had once been a stable, predictable flow of goods dissolved into a logistical nightmare. Canadian exporters saw the opening, and they moved not with hesitation, but with surgical precision. Leveraging a new economic partnership agreement with India, they rerouted their supply chains through recently expanded trade hubs. Saskatchewan lentils and Manitoba pulses arrived on time, clearing customs with ease. Dry goods, frozen foods, and skincare products from Ontario and Quebec quietly slid into the spaces once occupied by American icons. At first, it seemed like substitution, a temporary fix to keep shelves stocked. But within months, it became transformation. Canadian snack companies unveiled packages not in English alone, but in Hindi, Tamil, and Bengali. Smaller pack sizes reflected Indian buying habits, while flavors leaned toward local preferences. Canadian baby products came stamped with stricter safety certifications, symbols that resonated in a society increasingly conscious of wellness and purity. The difference was immediate. American companies, lumbering giants, struggled to adapt to shifting regulatory rules. Canadians, nimble and precise, cleared hurdles with ease. Soon, even beauty and hygiene aisles long dominated by Johnson & Johnson and Procter & Gamble were lined with Canadian deodorants, shampoos, and moisturizers marketed as paraben-free, cruelty-free, and safe for babies. The numbers tell the story starkly. Between January and May of 2025, Indian imports of American processed food fell by 17%. Canadian imports rose by nearly 31%. On paper, it looks like trade. In reality, it is something more intimate. Trust shifting from one cultural icon to another. For Indian consumers, this was not simply about price or packaging. It was emotional. For decades, foreign goods carried the promise of the modern world. But history carries its shadows. In the early 20th century, during the Swadeshi movement, Indians rejected British textiles in favor of local cloth as an act of resistance, a declaration of independence. That memory lingers. To walk away from a foreign brand is not just consumption, it is cultural choice, a whisper of sovereignty reclaim. And so, in 2025, when Canadian maple leaves replaced American eagles on packages across Indian supermarkets, it was more than a swap of suppliers. It was a shift in meaning. America's products, once symbols of aspiration, were increasingly seen as overpriced, outdated, and disconnected from local values. Canadian goods, by contrast, appeared respectful, responsive, and aligned with the needs of modern Indian families. It would be easy to dismiss this as temporary, a passing turbulence in global trade. But India is not just another market. It is 1 billion consumers, a young population, a rising middle class. When India changes its mind, the world notices. Part 3 Europe. The Quiet Abandonment Paris, Spring 2025. Along the boulevards, fashion houses flaunt their spring collections. Cafes overflow with laughter and cigarette smoke. And yet, in the elegant glass aisles of Monoprix and Carrefour, something subtle has changed. Where once stood towers of Levi's denim and stacks of Oreos, now stand Canadian substitutes, sleekly packaged, deliberately understated, and proudly stamped with Made in Canada. Europe's story is not India's. It is not about aspiration or modernity. Europe has always viewed itself as equal, if not superior, to America in culture, food, and lifestyle. For Europeans, American brands once symbolized convenience, affordability, even a playful rebelliousness. Levi's jeans were more than fabric, they were a cultural export, symbols of 20th century cool. Oreos were not just cookies, but part of the American myth of indulgence, fun, and family. But by 2025, those myths feel hollow. American corporations, weighed down by bureaucracy and litigation, fail to adapt to shifting European expectations. Europeans are not merely consumers, they are cultural critics, and their critique has become clear. U.S. products are failing on the fronts that matter most. Regulation became the battlefield. The European Union's strict bans on artificial additives, microplastics, and harmful chemicals left U.S. food and skincare giants scrambling. Oreo's ingredients list looked outdated compared to Canadian biscuits reformulated for EU standards. Johnson's baby products were shadowed by lawsuits and lingering suspicion. Levi's, long accused of unsustainable labor practices, fell behind Canadian and European textile firms embracing traceability, organic cotton, and carbon-neutral production. Canadians spotted the opportunity. Their companies stepped into the vacuum with surgical awareness of European values. Tito labels adorned packaging. Maple-flavored biscuits were marketed not as exotic, but as authentic, natural, and sustainable. Canadian jeans, produced in smaller but highly traceable batches, carried QR codes linking to the exact farm that grew the cotton. In Berlin and Copenhagen, such transparency wasn't a gimmick, it was a requirement. Even luxury shifted. French consumers once embraced American casual wear as a kind of democratic rebellion against haute couture. But now, younger Europeans prefer Canadian-made denim, marketed not as rebellion, but as responsibility. The tone changed. The values shifted. America's brands looked trapped in nostalgia, while Canadian ones spoke the language of the future. The numbers reflect the quiet exodus. In the first quarter of 2025, U.S. apparel sales in the EU fell by 22%. Canadian textile exports to France, Germany, and the Nordics rose by 44%. In processed foods, the drop was subtler but no less telling. Oreos lost shelf space to Canadian biscuits in French hypermarkets, while maple-based sweet snacks gained traction in Germany and Belgium. That the most dangerous blow is not economic, it is cultural. Once upon a time, French students wore Levi's to signal freedom, independence, rebellion. By 2025, levies looked like yesterday's rebellion, homophonic and dull. Canadian jeans, marketed with narratives of fair wages and eco-responsibility, became the new badge of youthful authenticity. History offers a haunting parallel. In the 19th century, Britain's textile empire collapsed not simply because of cheaper cloth abroad, but because its goods no longer fit the world's moral and cultural imagination. British made once signified quality. Then it signified exploitation. The shift was irreversible. And now, American made, tears on the same ed. Europe's rejection is polite, almost silent. No slogans, no boycotts, just gradual substitution, until one day, an ordinary Parisian shopper realizes that her pantry, her closet, her bathroom contain no American brands at all. And she doesn't miss them. The US might dismiss India as distant, but Europe. When Europe quietly abandons you, it is not just trade, it is reputation, prestige, legitimacy. The unraveling continues. Next, the story crosses the Pacific to Asia's most competitive, brand-obsessed markets, where the battle between Made in USA and Made in Canada takes on a different, more volatile dimension. Part 4: Asia. The fall of cool Tokyo, late evening. Neon light spills across Shibuya Crossing, illuminating waves of teenagers in denim, sneakers, and hoodies. For decades, this scene was America's triumph. Coca-Cola in hand, Nike on feet, levies on hips. Japan and South Korea became showcases of U.S. cultural export. To be modern in Asia once meant to be American. But in 2025, something has shifted. Walk into a Lawson convenience store in Osaka or a GS25 in Seoul, and the change becomes visible. Woes once dominated by Pringles, Oreos, and Kraft cheese are now flanked or outright replaced by Canadian snacks. Maple biscuits, lentil chips, oat-based milk tea. The packaging isn't loud. It's clean, minimalist, designed for Instagram. Subtle maple leaf logos have become soft badges of trust. The fall of American cool did not happen overnight. It began with whispers. Parents worried about U.S. baby products after years of lawsuits over toxic talc. Young people mocked U.S. cereals for being too sweet, too fake on TikTok and Douyin. Eco-conscious consumers began asking why American jeans couldn't prove where their cotton came from. In cultures obsessed with quality and detail, America's carelessness began to look arrogant. Canadian brands saw their chance. In Seoul, they sponsored K-pop idols not with oversized logos, but with quiet lifestyle integrations. A singer in a variety show casually drinks Canadian oat milk. A dancer wears Canadian denim marketed as carbon neutral. In Tokyo, manga artists drew subtle maple leaf motifs into character outfits, sparking curiosity among Gen Z readers. The Canadian strategy was not to scream, "By me," but to whisper, "I belong here." Numbers tell the story. In South Korea, U.S. snack imports dropped 19% in the first half of 2025. Canadian snack exports rose 46%. In Japan, U.S. denim sales slumped 28%, while Canadian jeans, marketed with QR codes tracing their sustainability, surged 40%. In Southeast Asia, the shift spread even faster. Vietnam, Indonesia, and the Philippines began importing Canadian toiletries and cereals in bulk, citing both lower tariffs and higher consumer trust. The irony is sharp. For decades, America's edge in Asia wasn't just commerce, it was culture. Hollywood movies, hip-hop, and blue jeans weren't products, they were myths. They carried the energy of rebellion, freedom, individuality. To wear levies in Seoul in the 1980s was to join a silent rebellion against conformity. To eat Oreos in Jakarta in the 1990s was to taste modernity. But myths must be renewed, or they decay. By 2025, American products felt tired symbols of a past era, clinging to slogans no longer believe. Canadian goods, in contrast, arrived unburdened by history. They didn't sell rebellion, they sold reassurance. They didn't sell freedom, they sold responsibility. To Asia's young consumers, raised in a climate-anxious, health-conscious world, responsibility was the new cool. History provides an echo. In the 1980s, Japanese brands dethroned American electronics not because they were cheaper, but because they were better suited to the moment, smaller, sleeker, more reliable. By the time Americans realized, the shift was irreversible. Today, the same is happening to food, clothing, and toiletries. Except this time, the challenger is not Japan. It is Canada. The fall of cool is the most dangerous kind of fall. The economies recover. Markets rebound. But when you lose cool, when your jeans, your sodas, your snacks stop meaning something, you don't just lose sales. You lose a generation. And once lost, they never come back. Part 5: Washington. In Denau, Washington, summer 2025. The marble halls of Congress hum with their usual theater. Hearings, speeches, grandstanding. But behind closed doors, unease grows. Reports pile up.